In this pencast, we're going to be using corresponding parts of congruent triangles to prove congruence and similarity. Alright, so this says prove segment BC is congruent to segment CE. And we're given that segment AC is congruent to segment DC. And that angle CDE is congruent to angle CAB. So the first thing we're going to do here is start a two-column proof. So let's start that right here. Alright, and then we're going to write down our givens. So we have AC is congruent to DC, and that angle CDE is congruent to angle CAB. And those are from the givens. Alright, so our first steps are going to be trying to prove that these two triangles are congruent. And then once we prove that the triangles are congruent, we'll be able to prove that the line segments are congruent. So you can see that angles BCA and DCE, these angles I'm marking right here, are vertical angles, which means they're congruent. So the first thing we can prove is that angle BCA is congruent to angle DCE because of the vertical angles theorem. Alright, so now we can go ahead and prove that these triangles are congruent. So triangle BAC is congruent to triangle EDC. And that is because of the angle side angle theorem. Which says that if you have two angles and their included side, and all of those are congruent, then the triangles must be congruent. Alright, so now that we have that, we can go ahead and try to prove that BC is congruent to CE. Alright, and we're going to do that using corresponding parts of congruent triangles. So let's go ahead and redraw these triangles down here at the bottom of the page. So this is triangle ABC, and this is triangle EDC. Alright, so what corresponding parts of congruent triangles says is that every corresponding side is congruent. So that means that this side, BC, is congruent to EC, which is what we're trying to prove. But it also says that like BC is congruent to AC, and that BA is congruent to ED. Alright? And the same thing for all the angles. So we end up just being able to prove that all of the angles and sides are congruent. Alright, and that's corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent.